Welcome in, listener. You're listening to a segment from the Slumpbuster podcast with Ju-Ju Dre. Find the full episode on Spotify, iTunes, the Google Play Store, or our YouTube channel. Enjoy. You know, we've kind of walked around this topic a little bit. We mentioned it back when the first rumblings of the Jay-Z Rock Nation deal happened, somewhere around our first few episodes there. But Colin Kaepernick is going to get an official NFL tryout. So we're recording here on Friday. Tomorrow it will take place on Saturday. What do you think of how this kind of came to be? Because essentially from what I was reading, some of the stuff I was hearing is Kaepernick was just kind of like chilling on Tuesday whenever the news broke and said, oh, I have an NFL workout? Awesome. And this is getting thrown out there by the NFL, not one specific team. It's kind of like a Kaepernick showcase opportunity. Yeah. Apparently like 10 or 11 teams are going to be showing up to this thing.
And that's kind of interesting that it didn't come from the Kaepernick side and that it would catch him off guard. And so I almost wonder if it's sort of a way to, like, conspiracy theories, right? Is that this is a way for the league to finally put a nail in the coffin, and that Kaepernick might be a little bit unprepared, but they'll get to say, like, no, we gave Kaepernick a chance. He just didn't perform, right? Or he wasn't ready. He didn't accept it. And so by catching him off guard, it almost forces Kaepernick to put himself in a bad situation. And it gives the league sort of an out to say, no, we gave him his opportunity and he sucked, right? Or we gave him his opportunity and he didn't want to answer the call. He, was scared or he backed down or something. So he's out of the league because of that. But that's interesting. I hadn't heard that it was from the NFL side, not the Kaepernick side.
So the teams that are registered to attend the workout, or at least have committed to sending at least a representative, are going to be the following teams: the Cardinals, Falcons, Browns, Broncos, Lions, Dolphins, Patriots, Giants, Jets, and Buccaneers. Oh, and the Redskins too, to add to their 50,000 quarterbacks they have on the active roster. So out of that list, which team would you like to see him end up with the most?
Yeah. Could you run through that list one more time?
Certainly. Cardinals, Falcons, Browns, Broncos, Lions, Dolphins, Patriots, Giants, Jets, Bucks, and Redskins.
So I'm surprised that the Bears were not on that list. I think the Broncos potentially could be pretty decent, though we've seen that they haven't done Joe Flacco that much justice, and he's put them in position to win, right? It's just their defense that has sort of failed them. So I think out of that list, for me, I would definitely say the Broncos. I think that Matt Ryan's a better quarterback than him, so I wouldn't want to say the Falcons. I think Arizona's just fine. It would be interesting, though, is maybe the Patriots even. So after Tom Brady, especially there's been rumblings of Tom Brady sold his house in Boston, right? Tom Brady says he wants to continue to play, but if he doesn't, I think it'd be really interesting to see what Bill Belichick could do with Colin Kaepernick.
Well, the thing about that is, and the big question that looms over all these teams attending or that have any interest is, what are you bringing in Colin Kaepernick to do, especially at this point in the season? You're not going to exactly tell a guy who's just, granted he's been working out, but you're not telling a guy that's been on the couch, as they say, to come in and start for you in, well, I can't play this week, but week 12, save your season. You're definitely at this point in the year bringing him in as a backup. And most teams, and this has been one of the bigger arguments about Colin Kaepernick the last few years, don't want to spend that much money or have their backup quarterback have that much attention. If you're the Broncos, with the young quarterbacks you have there, he has as good a chance to start there as anyone. Obviously, the New York teams, they're pretty set with their guys right now. The Redskins, again, we're a little unsure of Dwayne Haskins. We've mentioned that. But you figure he's going to at least get a couple more years to figure it out. Patriots, obviously, that's going to be a big one because someone needs to replace Brady. But then you have Alex Guerrero who comes out and says, yeah, Brady's got another 5-6 years in the tank. I believe it. Dolphins. Yeah. This one surprised me the most because if you remember a few years back when Kaepernick was playing his last season with the Niners, he made shockwaves again by wearing a Fidel Castro shirt, his Miami Dolphins press conference, which there's a lot of Cubans who are not a fan of Fidel Castro exactly, especially two, considering that Colin was not only wearing the shirt, but actively hyping him up in his contributions to society.
Yeah, a communist dictator shirt, right? That possibly oppressed some of, the fan base. Probably not a good idea.
Yeah, the Lions. I mean, Matthew Stafford is there as long as he wants to keep on playing for Detroit. And he signed a big extension. So, again, that is just a backup, exclusively backup type role for him.
And before he got injured this year, Matthew Stafford's been playing at a top 3, top 5 quarterback level.
Yeah. Browns, you got to figure that they're fine with Baker as well. Baker's their quarterback for the foreseeable future. So, again, another backup role. And I don't know exactly how that fits in that locker room, too, with all the characters they already have on that roster.
Mm-hmm.
Falcons, again, sitting behind Matt Ryan, he probably has the biggest opportunity to just be just another guy on the roster at that point. Mm-hmm. I could see him just fading into that locker room, but I don't really see what that would really do for him unless Matt Ryan was to get hurt. And then the Cardinals. So the good part about the Cardinals, if this was to happen, I think he would fit seamlessly into the offense just based off what he does. And especially if, Kyler Murray is down, you want someone with somewhat of a similar skill set. But I think we're so far removed from seeing Colin Kaepernick as a player that we've kind of forgotten about what we saw on the field. And obviously I'm very close to the situation being a Niners fan myself. I've seen the highs, I've seen the lows. I was Colin Kaepernick's biggest supporter when he first came out. And I was the biggest advocate of the move Alex Smith out of town scenario that happened. Because the way I saw it back in the day was Alex Smith has a set ceiling. He has the highest floor of the two, which we've seen, but his ceiling was always capped. Not to make a pun out of that. But Kaepernick had the biggest potential range of outcomes. And I think that showed whenever he got into the Super Bowl year. We were 6 yards away from pulling down that championship against the Ravens, albeit it just seemed that was just Ray Lewis's team of destiny moment. Now, in the years that followed, Kaepernick's performance, although statistically it was improving, you could tell the team around him was starting to fade a little bit. And then slowly started sprinkling in some surprise retirements, Jim Harbaugh's firing, a little bit of chaos in the locker room. And then suddenly he is a backup for Blaine Gabbert. Considering Blaine Gabbert is the definition of a perennial backup, that's not a good look. I thought one of the biggest things that was a detriment to him too is they kept trying to make him the next Tom Brady. They kept trying to make him the next Peyton Manning. Stay in the pocket, don't move, don't run, don't just go for things. And I felt like that just was never going to really play just based off what he does. And then finally, the kneeling stuff happened. A lot of media attention. Eventually, Blaine Gabbert showed his true colors, and Chip Kelly just said, you know what, let's put in Cap. He was winning games. Chip Kelly's college offense just kind of worked for, again, what Capper was doing. He had a decent year, albeit the team still only won 2 games that year. And I think now our idea of how good he was is just kind of skewed by how long it's been since we've seen him on the field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think so. And to be honest, I really think that people's political leanings sort of play a little role into how they view Kaepernick's success and his playing ability. So not only has it been a long time since we saw him, and the last time that we saw him, like you said, there's a lot of turmoil in the 49ers organization and just around Kaepernick himself that wasn't the best for his situation and his statistics, right? And we saw that when he had a good system around him that he fit into, he could perform very well. We saw when he did not have a good system for him and the right pieces around him, he did not perform very well. And then you add on top of that his sort of movement, right, the kneeling movement, does tend to make some people very upset. And based on that, I think they view him sometimes as worse than he is. And I think it's true sometimes for the opposite, is that some people unrealistically say he was better than he was because they approve of the kneeling movement. So I think there's a lot of factors that all sort of mix in here for how people tend to view Kaepernick.
Well, one of the big things that always stood out to me, again, coming from a fan perspective, was as he was trending down in his career, his statistical performance was going off the rails. You had people photoshopping trash cans on top of him. You had people straight up calling him garbage. He was the Squidward meme. That was Colin Kaepernick's image towards the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then suddenly all those people, as soon as this kneeling movement started, completely did a 180 on him to making him a top 5 quarterback. Oh, look at his touchdown to interception ratio. He's 4-1. If you were to ask me, is Colin Kaepernick one of the 32 best players or best quarterbacks in football today? I would probably have to rank him above some of the guys we have playing now. So I definitely do think that means he should find a starting gig. But let's not act like he's innocent in this situation too, as far as him not finding an exact home. The Broncos are attending this workout. The Broncos and him should have been like a match made in heaven 5 years ago. That was a situation where he could have potentially ended up, but he burned that bridge. And then the Ravens, who aren't on this list right now, they were literally nearing a deal with him. And then his girlfriend just randomly starts shouting off about how Ray Lewis and his relationship to the owner is similar to that of Samuel L. Jackson's character from Django Unchained.
That, which, if you haven't seen the movie, is not quite what you want to be compared to.
Not a flattering image at all.
No.
And then you have these other teams who have, and these other players around the NFL who have propped themselves up to act like saints in the situation, like the Seattle Seahawks, Pete Carroll, how they'll all the time say stuff like, oh yeah, no, we think he should definitely be in the league. We support this guy. We love this guy. And they didn't end up signing him. It's a very multi-layered issue in how people approach this that I just don't even know how to evaluate Colin Kaepernick, the player, at this point.
I know. And what would be really nice, and I don't think they're going to do it, but it would be nice if you can sort of have a televised look into this sort of combine for Colin Kaepernick, just to see how accurate is he still? How fast can he run? Is he still strong? Is he still able to jump high? Can he make the passes that you would want him to make? And I think if they put it out there for everybody to see, I'm sure there would still be lots of opinions, and people would say, well, he didn't throw that pass how I would have liked him, or vice versa. Oh, he did a perfect job. It was his receiver that sucked, right? But at very least, you can start to make your own conclusions about, could Colin Kaepernick still possibly play in the league? And
yeah.
I agree with you, Ju-Ju. I think that there's a few quarterbacks that are playing right now that even have a starting gig that he could probably do better than and get a few more wins than. And I'll be honest, on my team, I'm not completely sold on Mason Rudolph. We had Duck Hodges came in and won a game for us, and Mason Rudolph hasn't won that many for us. I just think people think that he's a better player than he really is, but Mason Rudolph isn't all that outstanding right now. And I think Colin Kaepernick right away could come in and challenge him for a spot.
Well, that's an argument that can be made. Is Colin Kaepernick a better athletic fit, a better player than Mason Rudolph? Probably. We've seen, again, we've seen him lead a team to the Super Bowl before. But when we look at a team like the Browns we just mentioned, talent doesn't always necessarily equal wins. Sometimes it's just about being a good fit for the culture, a good fit for the team. And maybe Mason Rudolph isn't the greatest quarterback. Look at Kyle Allen in Carolina. Not the greatest quarterback in the world. People will admit he's a physically limited quarterback, but he has resulted in more wins for the Carolina Panthers than the far superior talent that is Cam Newton. And I do think that there is just a certain amount of chemistry that a team needs. Now, am I saying that if you put Colin Kaepernick on your roster, your team's just going to tank, it's going to be over? No, but I do think that that is something that you have to be wary of because, again, if you're just signing him as a backup, you understand you're signing the most publicized, most talked about backup quarterback in the league. And if you have a younger quarterback on your roster that's starting, doesn't that cause some kind of turmoil too? Because let's say the Bears do sign Colin Kaepernick and you're trying to build up Mitch Trubisky. You're Matt Nagy. You're that front office. And you're told Mitch, hey, listen, we're bringing him in. We just think it's good to have a veteran quarterback on the roster. Don't worry about it. Well, what's Mitch going to think? He's got this guy that's just been talked about for the last 3 years as one of the greatest quarterbacks in the last decade of the NFL by some. He's going to be looking over his shoulder all the time in practice. And what if Kaepernick just starts getting random snaps during a game? Then you're just talking about just a complete break in confidence for that guy. Or it doesn't even just need to be Mitch Trubisky, but I'm just using him as the prototype because the Bears quarterback situation has been one of the more talked about this season.
No, I think you're exactly right. And that's the thing is the critics, if there's a quarterback situation that is imperfect right now, which is a lot of quarterback situations, but a Mitch Trubisky, a Mason Rudolph, I forget the kid's name that's in Denver right now.
Well, it's kind of a mix. You got Brandon Allen right now, who's
Yep, Brandon
probably just
Allen.
holding it down for Drew Lock for the moment.
So you get like that little mix that's right there. When you bring in a Colin Kaepernick, the critics of those young quarterbacks are going to be even louder, right? Because you have a former Super Bowl, not winning, but contending quarterback sitting on your bench. And so they're going to say, hey, it's time to throw in Colin Kaepernick the second that, there's an interception or a fumble or a messed up play. So, yeah, I think you're exactly right. That's why I personally think the Patriots is a really good spot for him, because it doesn't necessarily align with like Robert Kraft, right? I think Robert Kraft and Tom Brady, I think they're pretty outspoken about being Republican and having support for, Trump and stuff like that. But at the same time, like that's an organization where you've got Tom Brady, who he doesn't have to worry about job security, and nobody's going to criticize Tom Brady. Even if his play starts to deteriorate, everybody's going to say, well, Tom Brady has 6 rings, right? What does Colin Kaepernick have? Two, the organization tends to keep things close hold and keeps things quiet. And Bill Belichick is not afraid to say, like, I will cut you the second that something leaks to the media that I don't want it to, or, if we start having any troubles. So I think the Patriots is almost like the perfect spot. Do I think that's what Colin Kaepernick wants, is to be a backup behind Tom Brady? Probably not. But at the same time, like if it fits.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people will remember that moment that Kaepernick went into Foxborough and beat the Patriots, beat that Tom Brady-led team. And that's why a lot of people have put that as a popular landing spot for Cap. But if you're the Patriots, in all honesty, you already dealt with the AB situation this year. You already dealt with Josh Gordon, who you cut bait on. And you did mention Bill is so quick to like move off of quarterbacks. Would you even want that? I think you'd just rather just roll through with what you got. I mean, again, if Brady says he could roll through for another 5-6 years, Robert Kraft has already shown that he's not going to exactly tell him no.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it comes down to like that risk reward ratio, though, right? Is taking the risk on an Antonio Brown, where we've seen him have a lot of troubles, right? Like, yes, there's that risk, but the reward could have been fantastic for him, right? Is that Antonio Brown, you have a Pro Bowl level caliber wide receiver for Tom Brady to throw to, and you already have one of the better defenses that you've had in recent years. So a good defense mixed with a really good offense, that gets you a ring. And, worst comes to worst, you cut Antonio Brown like they did. And it was likely he was going to have some issue and you would be able to get out of that contract. And so I think same thing, like the reward is Tom Brady can get hurt. You throw in Colin Kaepernick, you possibly win another ring or 2 or 3 if Colin Kaepernick is at the level when he first came into the league. And, the risk is, hey, I'll just cut him.
But what's the reward for Kaepernick if he goes to a place where he's just off the radar, like New England? Because a big contention is for a lot of teams is, what does Kaepernick really want to do? Does he want to be a player? Does he just want to be a quarterback, another name on a jersey? Or does he want to be an icon? Does he want to be a symbol? Does he have that same opportunity as backup behind Tom Brady?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, I think that's the thing, is when he signed with Nike, and that was part of the big Nike controversy, right? Is that they were signing him more because he is an icon, not necessarily because he's an iconic player, right? Like there's a difference. Michael Jordan, iconic player, Colin Kaepernick, more of an icon. And so I think that's a good question. I don't know if I have the answer, right? Is maybe Colin Kaepernick's stance has changed. I would be really interested, though, to see if he does get another opportunity, would he kneel or not if, that franchise said, hey, we will not allow kneeling. And I think it'd be a really interesting decision and see what he's really about.
Well, now they've set it up in a way where if you do choose to protest, you can protest inside the locker room. You don't have to leave the team tunnel, etc., to do it. Now, has the political climate changed significantly since 2016? Is it better or worse in that time span to justify like Kaepernick wanting to continue this stance? We saw that not necessarily him, but at least people around him were heavy critics of Jay-Z. We talked about Kenny Stills. We talked about Eric Reed. And Eric Reed's still out there calling this whole thing just a PR stunt by the NFL. And maybe it is. Maybe it is just a PR stunt. But it's one, if you're Kaepernick, you can't exactly pass up, because I've heard this thrown around. If he does decide, I'm not going to do it, then he just looks ungrateful, and it's like, okay, what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, when you're going out on a date and you're trying to decide the restaurant with like your girl, what do you want? Tell me.
What do you want? All right, Ryan Gosling. No, I think this goes exactly back to, like I said, my sort of, I guess, conspiracy theory, right, is that somebody in the NFL decided that, hey, we should spring this on Kaepernick because it's the easiest way to basically set it up to where it looks like we're the good guys. And Kaepernick, it's either going to be difficult for him to prepare. Hopefully he's been staying in shape and ready for it. But, like you said, he just came off the couch one day and heard, oh, Colin Kaepernick has a workout this Saturday, and he didn't even know it. And so if he declines it, like you said, it's like, hey, the guy's ungrateful. We gave him the opportunity. NFL could cut bait and say, nope, Colin Kaepernick's never allowed in the league because he didn't want the opportunity we gave him. If he does show up and he performs poorly, right, you could say, hey, no, he just performed bad. That's why he's not in the league. He's just not a good player anymore like he used to be. So I think it's the perfect opportunity for the NFL to say, hey, look, we're the good guys. We gave him the shot. And for them to say, Colin Kaepernick, there's reasons why he's not in the league, and they've got two of them basically set up for him.
I guess we can kind of start veering off of the subject and say, just pose this question. Is he on a team by next week?
If I were a betting man, I would say no.
I would also say no. I just don't see a tryout on Saturday turning into a contract on Sunday. Especially too, and this point has been brought up as well, it's a Saturday tryout. Coaches are either getting ready for the game, watching their final game prep of film. They're not worried about bringing some guy off the street, regardless of who that player is. If you told them Peyton Manning was having an open tryout on Saturday, they still might not be able to make the game because they have to worry about that week's performance, not necessarily what, again, who their backup quarterback would be for the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're exactly right. And I think that's part of the timing of it is a Saturday, right, which is right in the middle of the weekend. That's probably where teams are starting to head to whatever city they're going to play in, right? So even if you're playing at home, you don't want to travel somewhere on a Saturday just to fly back to play a game at home. And so I think you're exactly right. Whereas if it were the middle of the week, maybe you could get a few head coaches out there and some other scouts and front office executives, right, GMs, out there to where it's like, hey, it's a Wednesday, maybe not the people playing on a Thursday night, but, you could maybe skip out a practice if you're one of the GMs or whatever it is, or other front office executives to watch this. But that it's a Saturday, like you said, everybody's distracted. They're getting ready for Sunday and Monday. It just is, I think, excellent timing if you don't want Kaepernick in the league. If you're calling Kaepernick, poor timing if you really actually do want to play.
I guess we'll see. And I think it's just going to be a neutral outcome. No one's going to really benefit from this. If anything, it's just another story. And hey, we love our stories around here, don't we?
Yeah. And I also wonder, and I know we got to move off this topic, right? We've sort of talked about it long enough, but I also wonder if those 11 teams that we talked about earlier, if it's sort of just fan service that they're basically, hey, we're going to put our name out there and we're just going to say we're attending the Colin Kaepernick workout, right? To make it seem like we're fair, we're looking at all options, especially if you're the Redskins, right? Like, you basically have to make it appear that you're looking at all options to make you better, even if it's Colin Kaepernick. But in the end, you might not do anything, right?
Well, what do these teams have to gain from it,
I mean, it's true, right? Maybe it helps bring in a few fans, though, Even
maybe if
we reached out and tried to get Kaepernick.
You can sell a jersey off of it, but I'm just looking at all these teams on here. I just don't see an ideal fit. One of the teams that's been thrown around that's not listed here would be the Carolina Panthers. Obviously, they had a new ownership change in the last few years. Mm-hmm. Many have seen him as kind of what you would call a more progressive owner. Mm-hmm. And obviously, Cam, Eric Reed, all those guys are some of Cap's biggest supporters. So that would be an option, albeit Cam obviously won't be on that team next year.